Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into the, well, surprisingly complex, but absolutely crucial world of cost allocation. We're going to try and figure out how businesses solve this big puzzle. What's the true cost of a product?
Okay, so to get our heads around this, let's start with a question that seems pretty simple on the surface. Imagine a refinery, right? It takes in crude oil, and out comes gasoline, diesel, asphalt, you name it. So what does 1 barrel of that crude oil really cost to process?
Well, okay, let's put some numbers to it. Let's say the direct cost to process a batch of, say, 1,000 barrels is $100,000. So that's $100 a barrel. Simple math, right? Well, if only it were that easy. That's really just the tip of the iceberg.
I mean, what about all the other costs? The stuff that's shared across the whole operation. The rent for the refinery, the salaries for the engineers, the IT department's budget that keeps everything online, even the wages for the custodial staff. The real challenge, the puzzle we're trying to solve today, is how you find a fair and logical way to assign a little piece of all those costs to every single product that goes out the door.
All right, so let's tackle this thing head on. Our first big challenge is this. How in the world do you split the cost of one single input, like our crude oil, when it creates a whole bunch of different products?
Accountants have a specific name for this. That exact moment when gasoline, diesel, and asphalt suddenly become their own separate identifiable things, that's called the split-off point. And here's the key. Every single dollar spent before that point is what they call a shared or joint cost. And this visual right here, it's the perfect map of the problem. You see that single stream coming in on the left? Think of that as our one big pool of joint costs. Then, bam! It hits that critical split-off point and branches out into all these different products. Our whole job as accountants is to figure out how to fairly slice up that initial cost pool and assign a piece to every single one of those outgoing branches.
So how do you actually do it? Well, the simplest way is just based on physical quantity. If asphalt makes up 30% of the volume, it gets 30% of the cost. Super easy. But it doesn't really tell you much. A much smarter way to do it is to allocate costs based on each product's market value, basically what you can sell it for. This way, you're linking the cost directly to that product's power to actually make you money. And here's where it gets really interesting. Look at the huge difference this makes. Using that simple physical method, our asphalt gets hit with a cost of $30,000. But if we use the market value method, its cost is less than half that, just under 14 grand. The method you pick literally changes how profitable a product looks on paper. That's a massive difference.
All right, let's keep building on this. We've tackled the raw material, but that's just one piece. Now we've got to figure out how to account for the cost of running the entire factory.
This giant catch-all category of costs is called manufacturing overhead. And really, it's just everything else you need for production that isn't the raw material itself or, the wages of the person on the assembly line. We're talking about things like supervisor salaries, the factory's electricity bill, and the wear and tear or depreciation on all that heavy machinery.
So to get a handle on this, accountants follow a pretty straightforward four-step process. First, you pool all those indirect costs into one big bucket. Second, you pick something called a cost driver. That's an activity, like machine hours, that actually causes those costs to go up. Third, you calculate a rate. And then finally, you use that rate to apply a little slice of overhead to every single product.
In this simple formula, this is the engine that makes the whole thing run. See, by making a smart estimate at the start of the year, say your total estimated overhead costs divided by your total estimated machine hours, a company gets this thing called a predetermined overhead rate. And this is so powerful. It lets them consistently and fairly attach a small piece of the entire factory's cost to every single unit they make. It gives them a much clearer picture of what's actually profitable, and they can see it in real time.
Okay, our final piece of the puzzle. This one's about those departments that are absolutely essential to the business, but don't actually, make anything. I'm talking about IT, human resources, or the custodial teams. Somehow, their costs have to find their way into the final product price too. So, yeah, how exactly does the salary of an IT guy find its way into the final cost of a barrel of fuel oil? I mean, it seems totally disconnected, doesn't it? But finding that link is absolutely critical.
Okay, so there are a couple ways to do this. The direct method is the simple way out. You just take the IT department's total cost and spread it directly over the production departments. It's fast, but it's not super accurate because it ignores that the IT team also helps out, say, the HR department. The step-down method is way more accurate. It gets that support departments actually support each other, so it allocates costs in a sequence, like a cascade.
For example, you might start with the custodial team's costs and assign a piece of that to every other department, including HR and IT. Then you take IT's new, bigger cost total, its own budget plus its share from custodial, and you allocate that across the production lines. It's a bit more work for sure, but it gives you a much more realistic picture of how the business is really running.
So, after all this theory, you might be sitting there thinking, okay, but why? Why do accountants argue over this stuff? Why does it actually matter? Well, let me tell you, it matters a ton.
The most important takeaway here is that this is not just some academic exercise that stays in the accounting department. The final cost number that you calculate directly drives huge, company-wide business decisions. I mean, if you get this wrong, it can be an absolute disaster. You could accidentally stop making your most profitable product or go all in on a product that's secretly losing you money, all because the costs were put in the wrong buckets. Getting this right, that is the bedrock of a good business strategy.
But just when you think we've got this all figured out, here comes the twist. There's a super common decision businesses have to make. Should we sell this product now, as it is, or should we process it some more to maybe sell it for a higher price? And for that specific decision, all of those joint costs we just worked so hard to allocate, they suddenly become completely irrelevant.
And you might be asking, why? It's because those joint costs are what we call sunk. That money is gone, it's already been spent, you can't get it back, it's in the past. So when you're deciding what to do next, the only things that should matter are the extra money you'll make and the extra costs you'll have to pay from this moment forward.
Which leaves us with this final, kind of provocative thought, doesn't it? If the right number for a product's cost changes depending on the question you're asking, one number for your official reports, but a totally different way of thinking for a strategic decision, then what does the true cost of a product even mean? Maybe cost isn't one single solid number after all, but a tool, a concept, that we shape and change to help us make better decisions.